40,000 years ago, they disappeared. Not in a cataclysm, not in an all-out war, not swept away by a devastating epidemic, but slowly, almost silently. And what makes this disappearance so fascinating is that it shouldn't have happened, because for hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthals had survived where almost nothing could survive. They had faced the bitter cold of the Ice Age, endless winters, and the most dangerous predators of their time. They were powerful, adapted, and perfectly integrated into their world. Everything indicated that they were built to last. So why did such a resilient species disappear? That's the question scientists have been asking for decades. To understand their disappearance, we must first understand what they really were. Brutal, primitive cavemen, incapable of thought. That image is false. Neanderthals dominated Europe and much of Western Asia for over 300,000 years. 300,000 years. To put that in perspective, our modern civilization has barely existed for 10,000 years. They have held out for 30 times longer. Their way of life really works. They hunt, they move with the seasons, they read their environment, they adapt to a harsh, icy, demanding world with formidable efficiency. And their bodies are up to the challenge. Dense, compact, powerful, their morphology is a perfect response to the cold. Shorter limbs to conserve heat, an enlarged rib cage for more powerful lungs, an impressive musculature. Compared to them, an average Homo sapiens seems almost fragile. Their hunting technique is direct, brutal, efficient, no arrows, no spears thrown from a distance. He approaches and engages in hand-to-hand combat with mammoths, giant bison, or rhinoceroses. Hunting involves an immense risk, where any injury can be fatal. And yet the fossils we have found tell of something extraordinary. Serious trauma, multiple fractures that nevertheless healed. Some individuals live for decades despite severe disabilities. This proves something essential that we sometimes tend to forget. Neanderthals did not live alone. They helped each other. They took care of their wounded, their old, their fragile. There was something akin to solidarity, perhaps even compassion. And some sites have revealed something else still. Burials, bodies buried with care, flowers perhaps, objects which suggest a form of ritual, a reflection on death, an inner life richer than we imagined. Neanderthals were not simple animals, they were human. So how could such a robust and capable people have disappeared? The first answer is the climate. Towards the end of their history, the world changed dramatically. The climate became unstable, capricious, and brutal in its variations. Temperatures dropped, then rose, then dropped again, as suddenly. In the space of a few centuries, the landscapes changed radically. Forests disappeared and were replaced by frozen steppes. The grasses that large herbivores fed on diminished. Prey migrated to other territories or declined drastically. Sometimes they simply disappeared. And that's where the problem with Neanderthals became apparent. They were extremely well adapted, but to a specific world, a relatively stable world. Their way of hunting, moving, and organizing themselves worked perfectly well, as long as the rules of the game remained the same. But when the world changed too quickly, this specialization turned against them. What was once a strength became a constraint. And that's precisely when another humanity enters the scene. While Neanderthals have held Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, another human species evolves far away in Africa. Homo sapiens. For more than 300,000 years, our direct ancestor has thrived in extremely varied environments. Open savannas, coastal areas, tropical forests, deserts, changing climates, resources that appear and disappear without warning. A changing world that will forge a radically different way of surviving. Then around 70,000 years ago, something happens. Some groups leave Africa. Why? We don't know for sure. Perhaps population pressure, perhaps curiosity, or simply the chance of a group following prey a little too far. They cross the Middle East, advancing slowly, generation after generation. They explore, adapt, and learn from each new environment. Around 45,000 years before our era, they reached Europe, the territory of the Neanderthals. For the first time in history, two humanities confronted each other. These were not two species of animals that ignored each other, but two groups of beings capable of communicating, planning, and feeling. Two ways of being human, shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of separate evolution. And from that moment on, the fate of the Neanderthals began to change. Homo sapien was no stronger. Physically, he was even more fragile. Faced with an adult Neanderthal, he would probably do poorly in a direct confrontation. But he had an advantage that we are only beginning to truly appreciate today. He connected with the Neanderthals, who lived in relatively small groups and were isolated from each other. Homo sapiens creates networks, links between different groups, alliances, exchanges, objects that circulate over hundreds of kilometers, and ideas that travel. This is not insignificant, it is revolutionary. When an innovation appears in a group of Neanderthals, it can disappear with the group. If the group dies out, the invention dies out with it. But when an innovation appears in Homo sapiens, it is transmitted, it circulates, it improves through contact with other minds, and it survives the individuals. The tools of sapiens evolve more quickly, its hunting strategies are refined more quickly, its ability to adapt to new environments accelerates, and in an unstable world, this flexibility changes everything. So what actually happens when the two species find themselves in the same territory? We often imagine epic battles, an all-out war of hordes of sapiens exterminating the Neanderthals in a prehistoric genocide. The reality is probably much more subtle and much more ruthless. Both species hunt the same prey, occupy the same sheltered valleys, depend on the same resources. And when resources become scarcer, competition intensifies. Not necessarily with direct combat, but with constant invisible pressure that builds up. Every prey that sapiens captures is one less prey for Neanderthals. Every territory occupied is one less refuge. Every difficult winter hits both species, but not in the same way. Neanderthal groups are small in number, often isolated, with no network to support them in the event of a crisis, which makes them terribly vulnerable. Less genetic diversity, less exchange, less ability to withstand hard knocks. A particularly brutal winter, a bad hunting season, a disease in a group can disappear completely without leaving a trace. Little by little, Neanderthal populations dwindle. The groups fragment, become even more isolated, become a little more fragile with each generation, and then they disappear. But here's what history doesn't always tell us. The disappearance wasn't total because when Homo sapiens arrived in Europe, they didn't just chase away the Neanderthals. They encountered them, they lived near them, and sometimes mixed with them. This isn't a hypothesis, it's a scientific certainty confirmed by genetic analysis. In 2010, when the Neanderthal genome was sequenced for the first time, the discovery was astonishing. Between 1 and 3% of our DNA comes from Neanderthals. If you're of European or Asian origin, you carry traces of this 40,000-year-old encounter in your immune system, your skin, and your biology. So why did Neanderthals disappear? There are several reasons for this. A convergence of factors that, taken separately, might not have been enough. An increasingly unstable climate that destroyed the balance in which they excelled. An adaptation that has become too specialized. A strength that becomes a weakness when the world changes with the arrival of a different competitor. Homo sapiens is not stronger or more intelligent. It is capable of changing with its environment. And in this world, it is not the strongest that survives, it is the one that adapts. The Neanderthals left us something invaluable. A mirror in which we can see what evolution truly favors. Not brute strength or endurance, but the ability to remain flexible in a world that refuses to stand still. A 40,000-year-old lesson that has never been more relevant.